Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast, an ongoing series of conversations and considerations to help people understand and embrace their own unique creativity for fulfilling lives and brilliant careers. My name is Ben Talon. I'm an illustrator and author, and I bring 16 years of creative industry experience working with the New York Times, The Guardian, the Premier League, and more. And I invite designers, artists, psychologists, scientists, coaches, athletes, sensitivity experts, and all kinds of thought leaders to help us broaden our knowledge of creativity. Creativity is a fundamental pillar of human happiness, a vital ingredient in the solutions to our problems, but so often misunderstood. The show is supported by founding sponsor and B Corp, Illustration X. Take a look at their stunning range of illustrators and animators at illustrationx.com. If you like the music for the show, it's by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on Spotify and all good music streaming services.
You know, if we're expecting everything to be constant and right and leading us in that one direction, then we're missing a trick or 10.
Today I'm joined by artist and mentor Joanna Henly, who returns to the show for a third time. This time it's been a while. It's been a good few years. There's been a lot of change, a lot of transformation as Jo moved from London to Lisbon. She's transformed from being a full-time illustrator into working as both an artist and a mentor. We're going to talk about what that means, how it began, the sensitivity required to understand others, the pitfalls of that, the need for white space, and so much more. This is the Creative Condition. Hello, how you doing, guys? I hope you're well. Welcome back to the show. We are here, episode 244 of the Creative Condition. I lose track of it myself. Too much? Maybe, but I love it, so why not? How have you been? I hope you're well. I hope you're feeling creative. It's Monday morning as I record this, and it's interesting, isn't it? I'm having quite the imposter syndrome morning. I'm wrestling with myself about the split of my time just now. It's a big conundrum, actually, and it's something I've struggled to get right over the years. As you'll know if you're a regular listener to this show, I wear many hats. Some people have described me as a polymath, which I find quite interesting. It's kind of hard to argue, but it's really important. It makes me worry at the same time because you can spread yourself too thin. Of course, I'm still predominantly an illustrator, but I am also increasingly a creative coach and, the guy who does the Creative Condition, which is growing as a beast in its own right, and it's something I really love, and I like the balance. I have a sort of brain, just like today's guest, Joanna Henly, that needs the variation, needs the challenge, but also you have to remain mindful of your sensitivity, because it can stretch you so thin and leave you so burned out, as Jo and I have had so many private conversations about over the years, that you really do get cut off from your creativity, because creativity is all about working, using what is to see possibilities and join those dots and have ideas that are original and have value, So if we don't look after ourselves at the core of that, which is a major component of today's episode, then this is why we become disillusioned and burned out. And I do feel slightly anxious this morning. I've come into the studio and it's sort of, do I give everything to what I currently am as an illustrator and, earn as much as I can? For me, the answer to that one is no. It has to be that way because I have a brain that needs the variation. Now, what's interesting is I'm represented by Illustration X, who are fantastic. Quick thank you to those guys, actually founding sponsor of the show on B Corp. They're a brilliant agency. You can see all of their represented artists, including animators and live artists and mural artists and people working in fashion and you name it, they're on there, illustrationx.com. But what these guys have always been wonderful at is appreciating the artist within, at the core of each of the people they represent. They don't expect us all to be grinding at the desk all week, every week, just under the banner of illustrator. So, as many of you will know, listen to this show regularly, Harry Lyon-Smith was the guy who suggested it to me. Harry runs the agency Illustration X, and it was him who supported me right from the off, despite no prior experience, just an interest and an increasing appetite for knowledge about creativity and helping others understand theirs. And he saw the opening in this kind of, accessible new medium and backed me. So that hasn't been the case. But at the same time, you have to oil the wheels of the thing that is moving. Therefore, I spend the most of my time being an illustrator, marketing myself as an illustrator, doing illustration, taking care of that. I always felt like that was more than a full-time job to do that effectively. And as the years have gone by, thankfully, I've got a strong portfolio. I've got an established brand, which does give me the freedom to go away and do this stuff. And these things have feedback loops. So this show, going out there, speaking at universities, it all generates opportunities. And therefore, I bring work to the agency also, so it's a reciprocal thing. So it's never wasted time. But what's very hard is to manage yourself in a week with finite hours in a way that doesn't exhaust you and burn you out and tax you so much that you're not really doing anything effectively. So I try to do a couple of days a week on the creative condition to keep it moving. I now have a coaching program. I have at the moment, it's limited to the pit stop session, which is a one-to-one intensive work through all of the framework of your creativity. Specifically, I also have the session, which is a workshop I want to take into businesses and organizations, do my talk about the creative condition, about the makeup and the nature of creativity, and then help a team of staff to work on a couple of immediate action points, set some exercises, leave them with the anatomy of creativity map, and off I go, and they can continue the work. So longer term, I would love to follow in the footsteps of what Joe is doing so wonderfully, which we will get into in a moment, which is mentoring individuals over a longer period of time. So Joe has 3 months, 6 months and 12-month programs for working with mid-career female artists. Incredible stuff. She knows a demographic. She has people that she can speak a lived experience to. It's all very empowering stuff. And I love to see it. So we'll get into that in a moment. But I came in this morning and you sit down and things are quiet on the illustration front. Things are quiet on this front because I've just started it. And then you've got this mountain of to-do, tasks between the two things. And you sit there and you go, oh my God, there's a paralysis that comes on. It's sort of, you get the fight, flight, or fight, oh God, I've gone blank. The fight or flight instinct kicks in anyway, fight, flight or freeze, kicks in. And you go, shit, like, do I need to go for a walk? How do I get myself out of this? So I take a breath and I look at my own framework and I treat myself as a client. There's something that I might cover on the podcast. But I recognise what's going on and I think, okay, look, stop looking at this as today. Stop looking at this as the fact that it's quiet right now. It might be busy tomorrow, and if you don't use this day productively or efficiently or in a way that is nourishing to me as an individual, as a creative person, then I will regret this tomorrow and I will have missed an opportunity. The flip side is it might stay quiet for weeks, for months. It might get twitchy. But if I don't bring myself into the moment right now, if I don't ground myself, if I don't access my flow, then I'm not going to turn it around. So it's on me, and I have to give myself this kind of pep talk. And I'm sure you guys are all very familiar about this. And it's a part of the reason I want to work with people to help coach them into getting realigned with their creativity, because I do know what it means. I do know what needs to be done. But it's just the old classic adage that we can't see that in ourselves. It's very hard to manage ourselves in that way, which is why I want to do the coaching work, because I want to help others do that. It's paradoxical almost. Same time, it's very exciting. So, because I've been working with Ryan Lewis, motion designer and animator over in California. I've been doing a pilot session also with Lauren Goodland. Some of you might know her as Dork Features from online. Wonderful graphic designer. Just again wants to get reacquainted with her creative flow and understand the direction she's moving in her personal work, in her work life. It's been wonderful working with her too. So I'm doing those now at the moment and building. So again, it's what time do you give to each? Maybe I'll never know, but I am trying to be more organised and get those lists down and write things down and be sympathetic to the way that I'm feeling on any given day and get myself outdoors, change my environment, whatever it might be. There's so much to think about. But to today's guest, Joanna Henly, someone who is incredibly well versed at this, and now Jo, congratulations to her, has been doing this for 5 years. Can you believe that? So Joe and I met way back, we met prior to our conversation on episode 4 of what was then Arrest All Mimics. So if you go back in the Creative Condition archive and listen to what still remains one of my favourite conversations, one of my favourite episodes that took place when we were both in Brooklyn, in New York, it was great. We met very briefly and sort of formally at one of our Illustration X live events. We were both represented by Illustration X at the time, and Joe was painting live. So we met there, very passing conversation, but I said, look, I'd love to have you on the podcast. Love your stuff, love what you're up to. She agreed, so it turns out we were both in Brooklyn on holiday at the same time, and I'd taken my mic along with me. So I hopped round to Joe's apartment. We had a great conversation then, and that's going back to, I think, 2015 now, when I started the podcast. So then we reconvened on episode 37 when Joe was kind of starting to find her feet with, I guess, make peace with the sense that she was wanting to blossom and wanting to kind of, do a little more than just be an illustrator and a commercial artist. And now you find us some years later where Joe is doing incredible work as a mentor. So head over to joannahenly.co.uk, Henly, Henly, to check out her mentoring program. It's brilliant. I'm going to read you a little bit from her bio. So I'm here to help you get to the next level of your creative career. I am Joe, mentor mid-career female artists to propel their creative lives and careers forward, supporting them to move through limiting blocks. I shine a light on their talents and skill set to enable them to harness their strong, unique visual message. Working together to clarify their future work that aligns with their dream goals and intentions feels fresh and exciting. I am invested in enabling artists more financial freedom and a creative work life fueled by direction, energy, and confidence. Expect holistic and deep work for neurodivergent and neurotypical brains. I'm also an award-winning illustrator, exhibit and fine artist, muralist, speaker, author, and founder of Misled Studio. So Joe's fantastic, and one of the reasons that Joe and I connected as well as we did is that we're both highly sensitive people. We're very empathetic. We take our practice very seriously. We sometimes give it too much. We connected over a recognised dual burnout. We were both guilty of going in too deep and giving too much of ourselves to this without the structure to allow ourselves to breathe and to process emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. And therefore we had many conversations, when we were both living in London about this stuff. And we're the kind of people that the moment we connect, small talk is completely bypassed and we're right into that, the heavy stuff. And but I love it. I have a lot of relationships in my life where I'm able to talk about sensitivity and about being a HSP. I do sometimes wonder if I'm neurodivergent in some way. Perhaps I should test for ADHD because, one look at my desktop is a clue that if I'm not there, I'm close. But you have to be careful with that misdiagnosis. I do have to police myself. And having spoken to Joe does the same. So that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about all of that stuff that I think a lot of you guys are going to resonate with. We're going to talk about her work as a mentor, how it came about, why did she move to Lisbon, and how has that been, getting out of that comfort zone, and initial struggles to find place and a network, and the ongoing growth as a human being is at the core of this conversation. So it forms, a trilogy of episodes, so you don't have to go back and listen to those to enjoy this one. So if you're a long-term listener for the show, you'll be well familiar with Jo from my previous adoration and waxing lyrical about her as a human and her as a creative professional. But I do recommend going and listening to the previous two. Much like Murugaya, who I had on the show 3 times too, there's a real arc in a person's development. It's a pleasure that I get from having done this show so long now, is that people return to the show and it's a new version of themselves, and that's very exciting, and it should give us all encouragement about where we can get if we want to, and we want to apply ourselves. So I'd love your feedback on this one, guys. hello@bentalent.com. Big thank you for the incredible feedback for Erin Riley a couple of weeks ago. She was a force of nature, the incoming global CEO of TBWA, one of the biggest advertising agencies on the planet. Erin is coming in with a fierce determination to protect and enable creativity at a time when fear is rampant because of the datafication of the world. We're all exposed to statistics, and there's over testing and there's over pitching, and that's something Erin was very candid about why she doesn't necessarily understand pitching and why she's here to fight for creativity and big, as they like to term it in the ad world, moonshots. Those big ideas, those Hegarty style plays in the likes of Flat Eric and those old Levi campaigns. And Sir John is somebody that Erin worked under at BBH for a decade, so that was a cracking show. And also great stuff about Carlos Moreno from last week, the pioneer of the 15-minute city and smart cities, and we talk about urban infrastructure and community and creativity, and a real deep show, that one. And keep the feedback coming. It's been wonderful. It's been such a miasma of guests this year, and I really love the variation, but it's wonderful to get back to roots, get back to arts and sensitivity and mentoring with Joanna Henly. So I hope you enjoy this one. If you get a second, please do drop a little review, subscription, rating on the platform that you listen. The Creative Condition book and the Anatomy of Creativity map can be got now at bentalonwriter.com/shop. You can get them as a bundle right now too. The map of creativity, there's some wonderful feedback on that, which is a joy, because a lot of work went into that thing. It started as a massive brain dump on a sheet of paper about the framework of creativity and evolved into this, actual actionable, workable sheet to help you stay on top of all the things you need to take care of if you want to remain optimally creative. So that's enough from me. Enjoy this conversation with artist and mentor for the third time on the show, Joanna Henly. Tell me about the retreat. How was that in the end?
I was offered a month, maybe more, to spend time with my creative practice in the Portuguese countryside in this incredible space, but with other work commitments, I decided to do just a week. So it was a really interesting situation, because how I would manage to create something in a short amount of time and how I manage my expectations of that. So it was really, my aim really was to find something really new. And I guess even saying that was really new, because I have such high expectations, and I'm a super planner, I'm a micromanager. I like to journal through everything. I like to have my aims and objectives. One of the reasons that I decided to do the week was the other artists were musicians, so I knew that I wouldn't be able to work in that space and just be in my zone with sort of music around me, and just went with the work that I've been creating for the last year and a half, keeping clear on what the purpose of that was, but also being really open to how that would feel, because I've just worked in my studio for the last year and a half solidly, and I created so much work last year. I was like, what will happen if I just go away on my own? So obviously, that's why I called it a retreat residency, because when you a formal residency, you'd probably be with other artists, or at least you'll have different facilities, you'll have like maybe workshops. It's a lot more structured, so very open. So other than creating a structure around journaling, meditation, walks, being in nature, it was very much about, okay, what happens to the work when I allow it to breathe, when I take it into a bigger space, and how does it look, how does it feel, how does it allow me to co-create with that space? So it was really beautiful in that way, because it was an exercise almost to sort of manage my expectations, and I took so many materials and things for lots of different processes, which was great. So if the inspiration came, I could project. If the inspiration came, I had canvases to paint on. And I invited two different creatives, I think I could call both of them creatives, women to model for me, because a lot of my work has been around the female body. So that was really interesting. And yeah, it became about, yeah, feeling into the work in a different space, but also sharing it and understanding how other people were interpreting it and kind of bringing it out into the world. It's almost like, when we're stuck in our homes all day working on our projects, and then we go outside and we're like, wow, I breathe differently, I feel differently. I'm not bouncing off the walls, or at least my ideas aren't. Sometimes we're bouncing off the walls. So it was a bit like that. It was really lovely.
Space is really important, isn't it? And it's something I've always been kind of subconsciously aware of and have experienced, but only now through the writing of my latest book and putting together this coaching model have I really started to drill down into where that emanates from and just how important. And I always think back to walking into art college, and this was before I'd left school, so I got dumped on I was saying no to everything on work experience because nothing was chiming. I didn't know what I was into. I was too young, hadn't yet realized there was a creative industry or anything like that. And so they knew I liked to draw. So one teacher had the vision at least to kind of put four of us in the local art college on a desk in a corner. And I'll never forget walking in, and it was just a big old industrial warehouse that had been done out, painted white, all the walls, partition walls, different courses in different rooms, but each room was huge. And just that feeling of walking into this big cavern of space and hearing the noises of people working on various things behind various partition walls was just I've never forgotten it, and I always get the same feeling when I work into kind of big collaborative spaces. And it's just something, I'm not in a position to have the luxury of a regular access to such a space at the moment, being
Mm.
based in my garden studio. But it has given me this awareness of the importance of recognizing your needs in that regard and when you might need to change it up as an artist, because you know that ability to sort of go, well, actually, I've been staring at these four walls for too long. I might just need to go and sit somewhere outdoors if I can't afford a physical indoor space just to change my perspective is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's super, super important. And also, we've all seen the statements and understand and appreciate how important it is to just, obviously we're talking about your example is talking about, somewhere, a new environment where it's almost kind of making your mind tick in a different way, and it's connecting with certain, maybe inspiring different ideas or just this different energy that you're feeling. And with mine, it was really diving into that space of not almost allowing yourself to not do anything, because a lot of the work that we do is very internal. I think we end up in problems when we're like, oh, I didn't do anything today because I don't have anything to show for it. So yeah, I think it's a release, it's sort of letting go. I wrote about it today in the newsletter, and talking about the sort of do's and don'ts of uh, working in different environments, actually. And I think one of the caveats was, all my personal opinion is, don't have too much pressure on producing, because a lot of the things, if you're allowing the time to just stop and think and look and breathe in a new space, there's going to be a connection that's happened internally, and that might manifest in your work later down the line. It would just have this kind of quick need of reveal or result.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. It's the kind of um, I don't know what the very roots of it are. Maybe industrial revolution and kind of working on the clock, temporal side of it, which is interesting. Perhaps that's a byproduct of that kind of that need to show something. I'm still guilty of it. Some days I'm great at accepting that today I just needed to clear my mind, and that doesn't involve laziness or sitting there, but it might be research, it might be reading, it might be just digesting things. But you have to do all that stuff, otherwise you just stagnate and end up looping in these kind of short-term ideas of productivity. But really, all it tends to do is stagnate. I find when you get trapped in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I spoke about this a lot last summer actually. And it's like, how about we just learn to define work in a different way? because the way that we work, the way that we think is about conversation. It's about absorbing inspiration. It's about reconnecting with your materials, tidying, just being in your space, feeling like you're not just showing up and you're diving straight into something, because we need that space for mistakes to happen or new thoughts to happen, or just to be able to process a project that landed yesterday. Or it's I mean, I guess I can talk to that a little bit more because of my moving to Lisbon and living at a very different pace. I work with one artist who's great. She's like, I want to be in the slow productivity movement, and I'm just so for it. And my goal this year is to really, even though we've just been talking about doing everything at once, it's just like, how can I really build a relationship, a really much deeper relationship with what I'm doing, by just honoring that one thing and my connection with that, without, and then that might even be for the whole day or for 4 hours. And that could be just how I feel about my materials, how I feel about my paints, how I feel about this activity that I'm doing. And it just becomes something that a term I've been using a lot, which is kind of like, we have rituals rather than tasks and routines, and how we can make things feel like we're having a relationship with it, because that's how we build it. That's how we can kind of nurture it and cultivate something that is a little bit more sacred, for want of a better word. And then when we hit things like resistance or defeat, it sort of helps us navigate those relationships, so to speak. In deep already.
Yeah. That's just something that came up in Rick Rubin's book, and he was talking about that kind of staying attuned to the feeling of a relationship with a piece of work or a project, and knowing when it's time to let go, or to take a break and go on to something else. Because when you feel that drop off in love and that kind of reluctance to work on a thing, there's usually something in that. Those instincts are generally pretty correct.
Yeah, and if you have built that slow relationship, let's call it that for now, with the task, with the space, then you're able to read the best way to navigate changes within that, or to grow it, or as we say, I use the term stepping stones or supporting characters. If we've got a piece of artwork or a project that's kind of like we're fighting with it, and it's like, it's not a good fight. It's like, okay, I'm exhausted. It's not going anywhere. And it's like, oh, maybe I've got enough from this to take to the next thing, and it's going to support the main characters.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we start to sort of personify them or humanize them in a way, because they're living embodiments of what we do and what's important to us. So yeah.
I think that's interesting, and that kind of leads me into this idea that I've developed in the last couple of years, since, and it's the kind of characters and the supporting characters. I love that, because in the last few years since becoming a parent, I had to make a conscious decision to recognize that I've always been a very social person. I've always had a lot of people in my life, and I've worked hard to maintain all of those relationships. But what that couldn't look like post twin parenthood was being in touch with everybody all of the time, and being the social organizer that I've always been. So it was making peace with stepping back just a little bit and not seeing that as in any way disrespectful to those relationships. And what I started to frame that as was, this being my story, much like everybody's life is their story. But then, isn't there something lovely about the idea that some people come and go at various times, much like minimal but not necessarily any less impactful characters in a story? So there's a lovely idea of, there's a friend for example, that I think of from art college back when we were 17, 18. And he's kind of just drifted in occasionally. Like we landed on a job together about 6 years after having barely spoken. Nothing had changed. It was wonderful. When we got in the same room, we picked up exactly where we left off. And I thought, it's lovely that he's come back into my life for that moment and then gone again. And that's his role in this story. And when you look at it like that, actually, it diminishes that kind of guilt that we tend to saddle ourselves with in that way. And I guess the same thing does apply to what you just described there about seeing artworks and creative endeavors in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, when we look at it in that relationship, definitely, because they have different purposes. As I said, it's almost like a stepping stone. And there might be this, it's just that line of inquiry. It's very wriggly and wavy and can go off piste. Like when I'm thinking about my process or supporting artists, which is great through the mentoring process because you can allow artists to go all the way to the edges, go completely crazy, go completely off in the clouds, but we know that they can support them come down, and we can sort of ground that experience and review that. But yeah, it's there's going to be a lot of mistakes and weird things and unusual things, and that's part of that play that we talk about, isn't it? And it's, you know, if we're expecting everything to be constant and right and leading us in that one direction, then we're missing a trick or 10, because, you know, going off piste is all about that. So when we're looking at it, and it's I guess relating it to what you said, it's about, you know, embracing and letting go. Some things pop in and pop out. Some people are meant to be there consistently, not many, and others drift in and drift out, and in a lovely way, and can bring some amazing gifts.
I think so. I think we're every one of us is energy, a source of energy, and I think we're whatever it is out there. I never have the words to describe what I feel, but we're interconnected with something that that involves nature, involves the unseen, and I think if you have to make time and space to feel. I believe that we are to some degree conduits, and think these things come. You know, they take on energy and life energy at certain times, and there's resonance. Sometimes they can't have that resonance. They can't be ready. You know, like the latest book that I've done was a 5-year hiatus. I wrote half a manuscript. My confidence just completely dropped, completely went off a cliff in a moment. Weird, literally halfway through a sentence on a train, I remember it well, and kind of just closing my laptop really solemnly and going, this project has died in this moment. It was a really weird feeling. 5 years later, it literally burst out of my unconscious while I was washing up at Christmas. And what I realized with hindsight and life experience is that it needed that 5-year gap to be ready. I had to live 5 years life to be ready to write what I knew I needed to write, you know? And it was then when it started, it never stopped. There was such a flow and a serendipity about it, and the thing was ready. But I'd accepted that it might never be ready, and that was that, and it was fine, and walked away from it.
I
Very
love
interesting.
that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because and that's amazing story anyway. And I'm a great believer, and we've talked about this a lot in the past about whether you want to call it a sabbatical, whether you call it a creative block, whether you call it like just time out, you know. There's so many things that we need. I think our mind knows that we need more time. We need other stuff. We're not going to push it. And I'm almost coming to my 5 years of, you know, stepping off the full-time creative life and dedicating myself to helping others, you know. And also, you know, that's been so fulfilling for me as well. I'm very selfishly invested in because I'm learning a lot. So yeah, I didn't know that was 5 years. That's amazing. So when you talk about it as a 10-year journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was 5 years on, 5 years off?
No, I mean, it's 10 years in its entirety, but in terms of the actual
Okay.
physical writing process of that book, I needed to have a lot more of these kind of conversations. I had to
Yeah.
observe human life more and just grow as a human, I think, before I was ready to actually put it in the format of a book. And in that time, there was that freedom to have more chats, read a hell of a lot more, study more, and by the time,
Mm.
but also there was a lot of personal pain in regard of I never got anywhere near sort of serious mental health issues, but I had a good few lows about things like the climate crisis, about my place in life, about all those existential things that these sensitive minds of ours tend to encounter. Um, that was a great driver because what that did was it forced me to pick a cause, which was creativity. And it was upon realizing and recognizing that we wouldn't be on this planet was it not for creativity, and that we're going to need it to tackle the collective problems that we face. And if that isn't a valid cause and line of inquiry for my life, then I don't know what is. So rather than trying to be all things to everybody being on that protest, donating to that cause, blah blah blah, it was like I've got a single focus now. And once I arrived at that place, I really invested myself in it wholeheartedly, which is what kind of carried me through to a point where I could write um, about that. But that's about me. I'm really interested in what your
Mhm.
kind of because when we first, I thought about this morning. We first spoke for the first time we did a podcast 10 years ago, which is really
Okay.
interesting. Um,
Wow.
and back then, I think you were. I safe to say you would have still been going on full-time illustrator at that point,
Oh
commercial
yeah.
predominantly.
Yeah.
So what were the kind of activation points in because it makes sense to me. Just having had a limited amount of conversations with you, one of the biggest things that I associate with you is sensitivity and warmth and empathy. Um, I don't know you well enough to say that with absolute confidence, but I do tend to trust my reading of that. Therefore, it makes absolute sense that you are now where you are mentoring. But, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because my when we talked the first time in Brooklyn, was that our first meeting? And I
Yeah.
think it was September, maybe 2015, and we talked about my romanticized idea of being a fine artist and the pet rat. And we're talking about I guess I should explain that because that sounds a bit odd, just dropping that in. This idea of being, and I guess it's just what we're talking about. It's like this internal job, this inside job that everything that I need to create is inside of me. So I guess I didn't have the words then, but I had this romanticized idea that I would have this flat and have a kettle and it would be really minimal. It would just be me with my paints, me having this conversation with what I wanted to bring into the world. So I was very passionate with being a fine artist, um, and really struggled coming out of university, and had my first big experience of creative block, and how to navigate that. After coming out of that, journaling and all of the practices have really sort of become a constant for me now and support the mentoring. I worked. I was like, what am I going to do? I mean, I had a creative block after coming out of the degree. So from there, I had no work skills. I was in London trying to work out what the next stage was, and went from one rubbish job to another job, from cleaning to telephone exchange, kind of odd jobs, and just really struggled with why am I here? What's the point in this? And I ended up in a great PR job, and I was like, no, this is terrible. And was very lucky to find a course which merged fine art and public art and community art, which I taught. I it was a post diploma, so they used it as a sort of tap on from my fine art degree. And within a year, I was running the course, which was amazing. And they said something similar to me. And they said, yeah, okay, so maybe you don't have any experience, but you have such empathy, sensitivity, and compassion. We'd really like to mentor you to help the community paint murals, work with women in refugee groups in Barnet. And so I did that for 6 years, and it really, really supported my ambitions, because when you have creative block, or when I had creative block especially, it was like, who am I now if I can't create? Who am I, and what have I got to give? What have I got to do? It became it was very, very, very difficult time. And through working with adults with disabilities, different groups, elderly, children, all around the community, I just found this, through the work that I was doing, and this love I had being part of a community, this amazing power that art had to make people happy. It got people out of their homes, gave people confidence, and it was so transformative. And it allowed me to reset, or at least reconnect with the idea of ambition, you know. I was like, okay, this is great. I can do this. And, you know, I created a big show. I curated a show at the space, and within the centre in Bromley by Bow. And yeah, it was really beautiful. From that, I started drawing. I had some trouble with my health, so I just started drawing. Next thing, I'm working with Illustration Limited. They're supporting me after I've done some big sort of PR stunts in the street art world, where there were there was very little visibility of women in that space. And yeah, it's a long story, really, isn't it? So I think for me, it's always about what's the next thing, because Misled was really created to see if I could do it again. And I did it really well and got to have an amazing, amazing career. But I really wanted to come back to the idea of, well, what do I want? Because I loved the illustration career, but you know, I was very good at giving people what they wanted, and I was very good at sort of adapting and feeling relevant and resonating with people and creating ideas that sort of matched briefs. But it was like, okay, well, what do I want now? And that sort of formed this big change of moving out of London, because I couldn't even read a book there, to really understanding that I didn't know what the next steps were. So moving here was, okay, let's just find some white space, noise free, even though Lisbon's really loud, by the way. Noise free space where I can have more than a pit stop, you know, just stop. And that's what I realized was how brave it was when I got here. I was just running on adrenaline. I was just running on momentum. And for me, the mentoring was very similar to me finding a community again, like I did in East London. And through the reputation and visibility that I was very lucky to have through my Misled freelance business, I was able to pick up and align with some really amazing artists that are willing to trust me to support them. But even before then, I was ambassadoring for Liquitex and Wacom, running tutorials, running workshops, workshops, filming tutorials, working at the V&A and National Portrait Gallery. I've created the book. So for me, the mentoring had so many. It was more than dual purpose. I guess the main two purposes were allowing me to really lean into my skills and grow them and expand on them, work with new teachers, work with more coaches and mentors along the way. And it just kind of allowed me to, we use the clocking in and clocking out. I use that a lot. You mentioned that earlier, sort of like clock out a bit and just go, okay, let's just have another life and support and create that community. And I really realized that I needed that. So it was a way of creating a community, a way of working in collaboration and brainstorming and idea forming, which I love doing with clients, but often you don't get a chance to sit at the head of the table. And I was able to do that with artists hands-on that trusted me, and it was just the most beautiful experience. And for me, for my neurodivergent brain, I feel like I'm using nearly all of my brain when I'm sitting with another creative and all the lights are on and it's wonderful. So, and it charges my energy as well. It just felt like a really natural progression, and it's allowed me the space and the finances to work with an amazing art mentor the last year and a half and really look at my practice and still be in play mode. I have to stop myself from going, no, you don't need to do a solo show yet. You don't need to do this. It's just like, just enjoy the process. But I'm learning so much from the artists that I work with, and that's helping too. Yeah, it's a long one, isn't it? I'm sure I left a load of things out, but we don't have a
No,
day.
exactly. No, that's the thing. Yeah, there's a few things there that really jump out, and the first one is the bravery of that big decision, and this is something that I've just finished, almost finished, creating my creative condition talk for that I'm going to be doing as a workshop as part of this coaching move forward. And one of the things that I want to discuss within that talk is the role of jeopardy and that kind of seeking that a mixture of discomfort, but also just something that just scares you a little bit, and making a big move like that not only forces you to be in the moment and to be really responsive and to really listen and pay attention to your instincts and your feelings, but it's such a feeling of triumph when you come through the other side of that and you realize that you've got the inner strength to make such a big change and to do something that you're really feeling. That's very, very important. And comfort zones can be very dangerous for that, if you
Oh
get
my
caught in
gosh,
the
yeah.
same web.
Yes, comfort zones definitely, and I'll do that. I think it's part of my brain. It's the way that I am. I need to kind of rattle the cage, so to speak. And yeah, we do need to just because we're in a society, I think, where like the first we're just so comfortable, aren't we? We're in this kind of quick click access time in our lives where we don't have to wait for things. We don't have to really, and also there's a lot of the way that we've been brought up as well from schooling. And I know that you've spoken to some amazing guests around this. It's like there's no sort of third perspective. It's either right, it's either wrong. It's very binary, and play is all about the colourful. I don't want to call it grey, the colourful grey. Yeah, and that is important because risk taking is really, really tough anyway. And for me as well, I'm getting to this point now where it's all really, really stable. When I started doing the mentoring, I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do an Ask Mentor. I'm going to do a talk. I'm going to guest for this person. It's like, okay, well, just just do the parts that are that you really, really love and that are stable. And then, build from there. But I was just so excited because it was the first time that I was able to make money on my terms without, the back and forth of a brand and it felt like it was so hands-on. I wasn't working with a team. I was working with one person. I could see the change happening. That's really, really beautiful. But yeah, I have to work with that. I love that you brought that word up. Jeopardy is a big one, and I loved the change that I made. But now I'm like, okay, well, what's the next thing? Because it's tight now. It's watertight.
How did you feel with the first? Where did your early points of like how did you build the trust? And I'm sure you wouldn't have gone into it without the trust that you could do it well. But invariably in anything new, confidence being about momentum and about proving to yourself that you can do it well. How did you feel going into the first kind of sessions with your first clients, and when did you start to feel validation coming from them that you were doing this well?
Okay, so it's worth saying that I was running free masterclasses. So I was running I was running for like 150, 200 people, just off the bat, just from my Instagram and my newsletter. So I was already able to really sense check where people were, how people were feeling, um, and what I was realizing is that no matter where we are in the career or on our journey, shall we say, and what discipline, we all want the same things. So for me, I started with just ad hoc. So what I mean by that is I would just work with artists for a low rate for just an hour. So it would mean that I had a little bit of grace and we could feel it out. And then through working with lots of amazing coaches and mentors, no one art based, but really, really incredible people in the UK and the US, going to free masterclasses, just learning, just really getting my head into it, and was very passionate about learning. And for me, getting to what I didn't realize was the end of my 15-year art career at this point, I got to use different parts of my brain, and it was almost like it felt that there was a sort of right or wrong. There was no. It was very colourful, but there was no. I knew through being in the trenches, I knew what it felt like to go through deep creative block whilst going through grief, whilst grieving my identity and the loss of a future or an understanding of who I was going to be in the world. So for me, it was giving people permission to feel like that was really important. And many of the artists that work with me just said, I really want to work with you because, I've seen you since I was in school. I've grown up with you. I've so admired the way that your career has run. You've done so many different things. You've been brave. That resilience shows up, and that, learning on the job, should we say. And I guess I was speaking a lot online, talking about, the artist way was having, as it always does, a big revival, and that was one of my really, really important manuals back in the day in 2000, and things would happen just on calls. I could just feel the energy. It was very emotional for me because I'd spent 15 years being, regarded as quite a highly regarded, a notable illustrator, but the testimonials that I got from just working with someone for an hour or 2 sessions and that's what kept me going. It's just mind blowing. I did my first, again, I was like, okay, well, coaches were saying, just fill your one-to-ones, just do your face-to-face until you've got enough money. And then, then you've got enough stability, should I say, and then, go on to doing groups and doing your talks. And I was like, I really want to do a group. It's so much work, but I got the testimonials after the first group came in, and some of these women had not shown any of their work to their husbands. Some women had not been able to call themselves an artist. And I was in tears in the coffee shop just getting all these amazing videos and understanding how many artists, some not ready to consider themselves or call themselves as artists yet, are living in isolation. And we all are. I mean, you work at home, I work at home. They're all real issues. And just having someone to talk about how you feel, what decisions you're struggling with, where you feel defeated, another option, which is pragmatic and practical, and it isn't emotional because it's not in your brain. Another person's eye on it is just magical because, we have friends, we have family, but it's the one person that can give you a real step up. That's their only goal, is to champion you, to support you, and to reflect back to you exactly who you are. And it's such a gift. I think I know I'll always do this, take different shape or form, but yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's funny, isn't it? I went through a real. The last few years have been really patchy commission wise, and in the worst quiet spell during that period, I remember being a little bit kind of not maybe disillusioned. I don't know, but I was having a chat with Laura, my wife, and I said, I've got myself in this spot where I'm only really trained to do this thing. All my eggs in that basket. And I understand that there are soft skills and everything else that bleed out, which I'm now really doubling down on to give myself more stability. But at that time, it was kind of like, well, I love design. I know what good design looks like, but I can't operate in design at this point. I can't operate Illustrator. I can't therefore go and apply for a design agency job. Can't go and just take a job down the road doing something normal, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world the way I felt at the time, because it just doesn't pay the living costs that I've come to need to serve. So throughout all this conversation, one of the things that I pulled out of a hat, I said, quite like the idea of being a therapist or of a psychotherapist. But of course, that to do that formally would take years and years of arduous training, and rightly so. And therefore, it's funny that a year or so later, I should arrive through various conversations at this idea of coaching, because it's pulling some of the aspects of that. But what it's really drawing on is the fact that, and I'm interested in if you share this, because I would put a lot of money on the answer being yes. But since as long as I can remember, I have cared inherently about people. Full stop. I cared about why the person on the bus might have been shouting, or the person in the street might have been upset or having an argument. Certainly cared enough to kind of counsel through all my teenage idiot friends through relationship issues. And I've always been that guy. I've loved it. And there's just something about me, and this isn't a brag, this is just something I've observed, but there's always been something about me that has enabled people I've just met to open up and share everything with me. And I know now from all the sort of reading and life observation that I've made that a lot of that comes down to my being a highly sensitive person. And that's, I don't know if you've read Sensitive by Jen Granneman, but I had Jen on as my 200th episode guest. Incredible book. And it goes into sensitivity, and it's all about breaking down the stigmas around sensitivity being that we're just soft, or we're, get easily offended. No, it's about actually that we're really attuned with our environment. And the way that Jen puts it is that 40% of all of humans are highly sensitive. Probably 30% in the middle are somewhere in between, and the other 30% are not that sensitive. And society simply wouldn't work if we didn't have that balance, because we need pragmatists. People like you and I need pragmatists to pull us back in sometimes, to help us to not be overwhelmed. So I guess my question is, have you always felt that same way? Because that's why I would always, even when I've just met you in the past, like I immediately open up. You have that same thing about you, and I'm just interested if you were aware of that.
That's so funny. I've got a couple. Yeah, absolutely. I am, and I've seen that through my mum, and I think my mum was a really big part, had a big part to play in. I'm going to say something which is really sad. I'm going to say it without crying. I remember sitting with her, and I think she was in her 60s, and we were going through a photo album, and she is someone that has the power to just walk in a room and the whole space lights up. It's beautiful. And it took her till that moment to look back, even photos when she was 40, when she was a young mum, and she was like, oh, I was really beautiful. And that really hit me. And yeah, I do have that sensitivity. I'm the one cheering the guy that's managed to get on the bus, that's run all the way to make it. And, I am that person. And I'm also knew that I wanted to be a teacher. Got turned down by Bristol teacher training because they said your portfolio is too good, you're not going to be a teacher. But I started my work experience. I was doing that for work experience when I was 15. But this sense of, and I think through my history and my past and having that sensitivity that's obviously come through being a highly sensitive person, being born into the family that I'm born in, having ADHD as well. I was like, what would my mum's life have been like? How different would that have been if she'd had that confidence? And she never knew she had that power. And that's been such a driver for me, as well as all those things that are definitely the same. And it's like, can I just put this mirror up? Can I just show you what value you have? Can I just show you what you have to bring into this world? And going back to your question about how do I see those results? It's through that. It's like when artists say to me, I'm so much stronger than I thought, I'm so much wiser than I thought, or I'm so much more capable. And we can have all the tools or the templates or the blueprints around. And I think that's where mentoring almost needs a little bit more education. Is like we're not shadowing, artists aren't shadowing our practice. It's so much more than that. It's how do we build an understanding of what value we have? How do we move through, like you speak about in your book, which is really amazing, and understand the shadow, understand resilience, understand what it is to be a human, because the growth has to happen internally first, rather than having this idea of, okay, well, I need to be, I know I'm jumping a little bit, but I guess the opposite end of that is, oh, I have to work in this way to fit into this trend, to be able to, and I feel like you just sort of fast tracking. And we know that, when it's trends last for a short time. And if you're lucky, you can build the momentum and you have that thick skin to keep going. I mean, there's so many different stories. There's no one or two pathways. But I think that's been something that's been seen by other people, and people can talk to me and open up, and I love that. And I've always felt that with you too.
Which also really again re illustrates the importance of community and tribe and positive relationships, because that's how you get a better understanding of self, other than of course spending time with yourself and observing. If you don't have the input of others around you, then how does that get fleshed out? Because my understanding of that side of myself very much came through those early teenage relationships, and then going to art college and meeting a whole new bunch of people and seeing how those people behaved around me. And I've always just been addicted to that, to finding the next new group of people. I love tribes. I love people. I love things that are nerdy, that bring us together, and common interests. And I think it's really beautiful. And that's the danger, isn't it? Post COVID, that we spend far too much time alone. when what we do, whether it's in the arts or whether it's, beyond that, is really only going to flower more when it's in collective environments and it's shared in person, and you can feel that sort of see the growth in a person, particularly in what you're doing now with the mentoring. I think it's incredible, and it must be just I get this. I have had that feeling from kind of one-off lecturing days and having given people advice through the stuff I do with the podcast, but only in fits and starts. And I'm hungry for more of that now, because it's just the best feeling in life when you see somebody, when you can help someone,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know that you're talking their language when you know that it's like running art workshops in London, and I did this for a really long time. It's like, that energy of a young learner, that light, all the lights go on. Using that phrase again, it's like, oh, it is magical. This is amazing. The things you take for granted, and yeah, I'm definitely excited about moving forward to collaborate with others and other teachers and artists on programs and taking it into a more consultation space, because there's a lot of people I work with a lot of artists that are in corporate jobs, for example, and I know that you do too, and I think that's kind of maybe not understood so much. And there's a lot of corporations, brands, organizations where teams or sectors are expected to brainstorm or think creatively, and no one's giving them that support and giving them the sort of out of the box thinking, which is really, really important. And that's something that I want to tap into in the future, definitely. I'm very excited to work with artists now that I'm mentoring to become mentors. And I work with one artist here, actually in Lisbon, who's doing an amazing job. She's got such a great network, and it just made so much sense. And she's a product designer, so she's very hands-on, and she's very good at managing people and liaising with clients and presenting, and she's got some amazing skills, and that's really exciting too. So I guess that's what I was saying about the education around it. It's like it's almost more than mentoring, isn't it? It's more than consultation. It's very holistic for me, as well. I even work with women around how their brains work differently at different times in the month, because that was coming up for artists. Prolific artists were not able to work, and we identified that it was down to the menstrual cycle. So, and that's something that I've worked and work with, because just before a new cycle, our brains communicate. The left and right side of the brain communicate for just a few days. So it's an amazing time for journaling. It's an amazing time to evaluate your work, because you kind of see things a lot clearly. That's why we have PMS, because it's like, oh, all the shit that I've just like put under the carpet all month, I'm having to deal with now. It's like the curtains come down, So I find all of this stuff fascinating, and I know that you're really excited by neuroplasticity, epigenetics, and that just stuff like just lights just gives me just like, yeah, shivers. I love it, and there's so much to explore with it. So weird. I'm hands-on and learning, and I'm just gorging on it. And I think if you feel like that about a job, then you're in a good place. And for me, yeah, I would like more time to do the creative work. And it's very different being an artist and learning about the art world now, especially living in somewhere like Lisbon in Portugal, to being an illustrator, because everything's so fast, everything's so involved, things are a very different pace, and it's very clear now. I'm working in the unknown, and so yeah, it's a lot, but I'm very, very happy to be growing with it. And now I'm mentoring myself. I wrote the program that I teach for myself, and then ended up, through all my experience, through all the books that I read, through all the teachers that I had, and through all the modalities that I created over the years. And I was like, okay, so I finished now with my mentor. Now I need to mentor myself. And I'm being a very, very bad mentee.
That's incredible what you said about the menstrual cycle. I'm very much going to be adding that as a consideration,
Yeah,
because there's
it's
more
huge.
various
It's huge.
sections. One of the sections is body and the brain, and about linking up the two, because everyone sort of goes, oh, well, the mind is separate from the body. It's really not. You have to nourish the body to get the mind firing properly, and that is very much, that's all women.
It's
That's the
huge.
yeah.
Yeah, because,
You can't overlook that, and I see firsthand every month what that looks like with Laura, bless her. She'll have a couple of days where, of course, she's more sensitive and more tired, and if you can't factor that in, then you're in for a bumpy ride. There's going to be a lot of chaos in those days if you don't. Whereas
exactly.
Laura's actually been journaling that for herself now over the last few months, and when it comes, now she's ready. She's on guard. She knows why she might be slightly more overreacting to that thing, or underwhelmed with that thing. There's so much that comes into that I can't know as a guy, and it's kind of like, well, but what I can do is do the study, and I get incredibly excited about that. And I never thought I'd be excited about studying the menstrual cycle,
There you go.
but here I am, and that shows that I'm on the right path for something, because
You are. I
I
love
am
that.
I am just interested in the human condition. I just find it so bloody fascinating, and it's like, and always have. And I think that's where now, as a 41-year-old guy, it's not that I don't love my art and I don't love illustration, and I guess you might have gone through the same thing, but it's just that I need to reframe it now. And I have to, my passion is more about sort of, I need more belonging. And what you said there about the kind of fast turnaround and the disposability almost of the
Yeah.
commercial illustration game, it's got its financial upsides sometimes, but really, I need deeper than that for all the reasons that we just discussed about sensitivity. And, therefore, and this is a question I want to ask you. So, you said about the stability through the mentoring to make bigger decisions with your artwork. On an energy level, does that rush and that kind of sense of relationship with your mentees and the things that you learn and the satisfaction that you take from that, do you turn around and kind of supercharge your artwork with that now? And I guess that has that stability, giving you the freedom and then the energy to go away that is more emotional than intellectual with your art.
Um, yeah, that's an interesting one. I have a lot of support, and I have an amazing relationship with my mum, and she reflects the changes more than I see them. Um, Emotionally, yes, it charges me. I'm I'm also use a lot of I use a lot of self-care tools, self. So I journal as well. I work with my um, in in honor, let's say, or in relation to my hormones. So definitely get Laura to buy Wild Power. It's the most amazing book about that. Because obviously I don't wake up with testosterone and go to bed with it. It's all very wavy, and so I do a lot of work around that. I journal every day. I do transcendental meditation, which is low. It just shifted so much of my anxiety, so much calmer and clearer. But for me, I think currently, now you're asking me currently, I would say I've got a lot more peace around the practice that I have without that feeling of that quick turnaround. That's, I guess, why it's present and we're talking about it now. That's very new. It's really new. I've been doing the TM for, I just celebrated my first 60 days. But even after the second day, I felt so completely different about, my mind was completely different. It's been so incredibly transformative. So it's allowing me to go at a slower pace, and also trusting, which I think is the most important thing when you're going through change. With the influence and inspiration of working with other artists, it has been around that, when artists are like, no, I really want to do this. I really want to work on, um, I really want to work on this for a couple of days, but I have to take time off. So if I've said, for example, can you keep up a consistent practice? And through working with them and them saying, okay, I had a couple of artists actually, I can do bursts, insane, hyper focus, flows, and then I'm an empty husk. And those kind of conversations really penetrate and make me think. And I'm like that. And we can't say, we're starting to question this idea of consistency, thank God. But we're not. So that's come up for me. That's come up for me a lot. And I think about the conversations I have with them deeply. Think about them when I'm in my meditation, or we have such deep debates. Almost, they're not debates, but it's very curious, and there's a very radical candor there, so we're very open and the space is safe. So a lot of stuff comes out of that space, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's it's definitely injected a lot into how I work and think. And yeah, it's ongoing.
Mm,
I think I answered the question.
you did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I think we all want more choice and control, don't we, over our artistic direction, because it's just such an extension of self and it's so personal. Even when it's in the commercial environment, it's a very personally driven thing. And I found it's fine in my younger years to go hammer and tong and to do all that fast turnaround. And I loved it. I got a huge buzz off. Still do to a degree. I did a Guardian one the other week with
Yeah.
like a 5-6 hour deadline.
Yeah,
I'm not saying I
right.
don't want to do it. I love it. I just want to be more in control of the structure of, where I'm putting my energy. And I think that's just maybe an older and wiser thing.
Yeah, I think it's just what I said as well. It's how important trust is, because we have this feeling. There's a couple of feelings that come up that are really present, and it's like this idea that we're behind, that we should be doing more than we're doing. And also, if we stop, that it's almost like a physical thing that we just lose, or we can't reconnect with it. So that's really important. You needed to take 5 years off writing your book, and we have it in our hands, and it's an amazing piece of so much knowledge, so much learning. I'm absolutely loving it.
Thank you.
And I've needed to take 5 years to, yeah, exactly, have that different part of being myself, through shedding, which comes with a lot of negative beliefs, ancestral. This idea of, if you're a teacher, you're a failed artist, and I deal with that, a lot of issues around shame with artists that are a bit embarrassed sometimes to have a mentor. Sometimes have a shame attached to, even though they have amazing skills, what people will think if they start mentoring as an artist, and it's really prevalent. But it comes down to trust, and um, just following, yeah, trusting that it's always there. I mean, I've had so many times out, so much space, and even though I do believe that we do often have to bridge the gap between inspiration and action when we need time out, you've got to take it and just live that life. And it's been, yeah, it's been terrifying at points, sort of taking my foot off the gas and not being a creative, but that I filled with just being full time. I want to be the best of the best of what I can do to support artists. And yeah, now see what's next. It's exciting. It has, but like you said earlier, it has to be a bit terrifying,
Yeah, it does
or
that. Yeah.
you're not really living, without sounding cliche. You need to kind of rise a little bit above that sense of, oh gosh, I wish if I didn't have the lurgy, I'd probably be able to mention some names. But just the idea of having a big scary vision is just so important, because we
Hmm.
often get so lost in the details. I remember once I was trying to do a press release and I couldn't do it, and I was like, oh my gosh, if you're going to continue, at the time, running a global um, design studio and working with some of the biggest brands on the planet, then you're going to have to, like, you can do this. But we just lose that flex, I suppose. We lose that trust. Um, so yeah, it's I think that's one of the most important skills, is how can we develop that resilience? How can we develop that trust and coach ourselves? And that's something that's come through with sort of dropping it in and holding it back at times, and then dropping it in and holding it back as a method for my mentoring. And now it's a constant. I make sure that every artist that I work with journals, so they're building their emotional resilience, and coaching themselves as well as me by their sides, so that
Hmm.
that we can celebrate that they've moved through things in between sessions, or that growth is exponential. It's really lovely. But yeah, I love that Laura's journaling is it's the best practice. I started that when I listened to the Artist Way, read the Artist Way, I think in 2000,
Yeah.
and I've done it every day since. It's been a lifeline.
Yeah, I mean, it started with endometriosis for Laura, and so it was first checking in on that and looking at the nutrition and ways, lifestyle changes to kind of to give that, make that the least painful it could be, and then of
Yeah,
course that is then interlinked with the menstrual cycle, but yeah, it's like any physical, emotional, mental tormentor in our life. It's about first gaining awareness of its behavior and everything else, and then
yeah,
making
calling
the
it
right
out.
yeah, the right changes, to gain ownership of it. And sometimes even if it is just the understanding of, that helps, because at least you can roadmap it and you can know what you're feeling a little bit more, like the identity of it. Otherwise, it's all random and just coming out when you least expect it and everything, and that adds a whole new layer of hurt.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, talking about women's bodies, hormones, and ADHD as well. If you have a neurodivergent brain, then those symptoms flare up terribly. And it's not just the last week either. You have, in the month, very quickly, you have 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter. In between those seasons, some can last 5 days, some can last 10 days. And then, but in between, you've got a sort of transition, which is problematic, can be problematic, because your brain and your body need something different. So, but yeah, I mentioned Wild Power. I read that when I was 45, and I literally cried. I was
Yeah.
so gutted. I was so gutted that I didn't have that wisdom and that knowledge. It's like a Bible for me. It's so incredible. And I was like, why has it taken so long for me to access that information? And that's why it's such a huge part of how I work with women. And for them. And again, you were saying about how do you know the results? They're like, I know that obviously most of us, many women know this feeling of like, almost hands in prayer going, oh my God, I'm not nuts. Thank God I've got my cycle. But it's that feeling of, okay, so these are just my hormones, and this sense of ownership, this new sense of ownership that women have through knowing what they need at what time and giving themselves self-compassion is there's so much growth there.
Brilliant. Well, I could go all day talking to you, but I'm not going to keep you that long. But where do people need to go to find out more about your mentoring?
Okay, so I'm merging. So the mentoring is now on my website, which is still Misled Studio. It will be changing to Joanna Henly, but you can find the mentoring in either place. So it's joannahenly.co.uk, and it is dense with all the information about what my mission is, who I work with, how I work with them, and what the results are. And I'm on Instagram, mostly that really. And that's either Joanna.Henly or misled.studio, I believe.
Awesome. Well, yeah, what's really exciting about this is, like I've had Matt Essam on the show. I've also had Kerry Lyons, both creative coaches, now yourself. And I love seeing how people do their version of. It's very exciting, and it's a totally personal thing, which is lovely, much like any art form. And it's great because it doesn't give me any sort of fear coming into it as a newbie, because I know, got a totally unique way of doing it, a personality and everything else. So it's great. And, like we said, like we discussed before, it might be really cool to get some kind of regular, check in with one another and sharing ideas and all that kind of thing. Yeah. And again, it goes back to the tribe thing, doesn't it? It's a really lovely part of it.
Yeah. And you're giving a lot. I mean, I absolutely love the process, and yes, it does charge my energy, but there are times where, it's to be able to have those conversations with someone else that can support them within, if we were working as psychologists or psychiatrists, we would do that. So yeah, I'm very, very keen to do that. I think it's really supportive and helps kind of nurture the brain.
Big congrats on getting to 5 years, because it's such a great milestone, and it's really inspiring to see too.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, very much so. And as ever, thank you for your time.
Thanks, man. It's lovely. So good to be here for number 3. I love it. Thank you so much. Always great to chat.
Yep, as ever. Do you know, part of me wishes that I could have somehow recorded all of the private conversations in between the 3 episodes where Joe's been on this podcast, and just done one long, deep dive into what it is as a sensitive person, as a person who is ebbing and flowing with the balance of their practice, and because it's just, it's one of those things. It's lovely. So ever since that first conversation, I think we made a great connection then, and we stayed in touch and became friends. And whenever we would meet, it would go straight into the depths. And when I was thinking about starting my own creative coaching program, Joe was very giving, and we had a long conversation where, nothing was off the table. I asked Joe a lot of questions, a lot of naive stuff as someone coming into this fresh, but also about her own experiences. And she was incredibly selfless and helped me out loads, which was massive. And it's just an indication of what a lovely person she is. And, that's 3 long form conversations now where we have often explored the way we feel and the sensitivity. And I hope you got something from it, because it's always been a great hit, and I hope this one will be too today. And it gives me great delight to see Jo going from strength to strength and doing this work. And like I said on this show, there's a warmth that I've always detected in her. So to see her working with people one-to-one and enhancing people's creativity and being additive to their lives it just feels right. So go on, Joe. Carry it on. Congrats on the 5 years. It's massively impressive and inspiring, especially for someone who sits here on a Monday morning and just kind of frets and melts into this massive imposter. And it's weird how you go from being very assured, very self-assured with 16 years experience in one field, stepping into a field that is drawing on a lot of the learnings from that. So it's not entirely disconnected, but feeling like I'm back at the till and having to work out a new till and a new retail job and a manager looking over my shoulder. And it's like, oh my word, this is, get a grip. It's not so easy sometimes to get a grip, and you have to really kind of coach yourself and lean on all the things you've learned. So that's my take on it, my thoughts on it. Thank you for listening. Big thank you to Joe for taking the time to do that today. It was an absolute pleasure. It gives me a kick up the arse to get my stuff going on. So if you're interested in any of that, give us a shout. If you think Joe's a better fit, head over to joannahenly.co.uk, Henly for surname there. It's amazing working with mid-career female artists. There's some great testimonials on her site with a friend of mine, Claudine Sullivan, who again I became friends with through this show. And also Laura Hope Lloyd, who was another brilliant guest on this show. That's 2 out of 4 from her testimonials. That's cool, isn't it? Also Mish Maudsley and Rebecca Fennelly, all giving great feedback on what Joe's doing. So head over there if she's a fit for you. If you want to have a chat about the session I'm offering for your business, give me a shout. I've got some lovely branded, designed PDFs. The website's going to be a little way away just yet, but I'm happy to jump on a call, talk it through, share the document that gives you all the information and see if I can come and help you with the workshop. Also the session, which is, the pit stop, which is the one-to-one intensive burst of a coaching session. So it's going on. Plenty of options out there. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. We've got some great guests coming up. Got Kyle Chaker, staff writer at the New Yorker and author of Filter World, How Algorithms Flattened Culture. It's an incredible book that I highly recommend if you haven't read it. I'm not going to waffle. Big thank you to the sponsors of the show, founding support at illustrationx.com. Check out that website there that I've just read for their animation and illustrator portfolios. Also their Trend X report, which is frontline reporting on the illustration business from the agents, what they're recognizing, trends they're seeing, things that are in demand. Take a look. Very valuable stuff. They're doing a lot of great work for the industry. And also, if you get a second, please do check out the wonderful Ukrainian Institute, who are supporting a embattled Ukrainian creative community in this horrible time of war by connecting them worldwide. So if you can share the work, if you can commission somebody, if you can help them in another way, have a look at ui.org.ua and see what you can do. They need all the help they can get right now. Thanks for listening, guys. If you get a second, please do rate, review, subscribe to the show. It helps massively. I say it every week. It's a drip feed. You get the occasional one, but it's hard. I know we're all busy, but please do it. If you get a second, it would really help. It would mean a lot. The Creative Condition book is out. You can get it now at bentalentwriter.com/shop, along with the Anatomy of Creativity map, which will help you not become me on a Monday morning. It's a good piece of coffee, isn't it? You like that? Cheers, guys. Take care. Have an awesome week.